Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Torah View. What is it about smell? So powerful, so evocative. We even talk about aromatherapy, its effects on the human psyche, on human behavior. In fact, there was a fascinating study where 22 students were divided into two rooms. In one of the rooms was placed a pail with a very subtle cleaning agent aroma in it. In the second room was placed a pail with only water and no cleaning agent in it. After the respective pails were placed in these two separate rooms, the students were then presented with cookies that crumbled in their hands when they ate them. The study shows that the first group, who first sat in a room where there was a subtle aroma of a cleaning agent, were careful to clean up the crumbs that fell while they ate, while the second group was much less apt at doing that. We are all blessed with 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Of all of the 5 senses, smell is uniquely spiritual. In fact, every Saturday night, when we make the Havdalah service, we make a blessing over a fragrance, and that is a form of spiritual healing for the absence of heightened spiritual soul that we are now going to experience as we exit from Shabbat into the days of the week. So what is it that compensates for the diminished state of soul? Fragrance and smell. We know that smell has a very powerful way of evoking memories. Scientists speculate that somehow the sense of smell has a more direct link to the limbic system in the brain. One of the classic Jewish commentaries has this fascinating perspective on smell. If you look closely at the Torah's account of the sin in the Garden of Eden, you will find that the Torah employs all of the senses that Adam and Eve saw, touched, tasted, and heard. The one sense that is not mentioned in the narrative of the sin of the Garden of Eden is smell. And so in some way, smell was untouched by sin. And that's why it has such a profound, or can have such a profound spiritual effect on us. This is all a background, if you will, to a central feature in the Torah portion of this week, which deals largely with the service of the high priest in the temple on Yom Kippur, the highlight of which was when he entered into the Holy of Holies. And what did he do in the Holy of Holies? He offered incense that rose up in smoke, filling the temple with its aroma. The Hebrew word for smoke is ashan, which comprises 3 Hebrew letters: ayin, shin, nun. Our sages tell us that this alludes to the fact that Yom Kippur is the pinnacle of holiness of olam, which means space, shana, which means time, and nefesh, which means soul or people or person. So on Yom Kippur, it was the convergence of the holiest of time, the holiest of space, and the holiest of people as the high priest entered into the Holy of Holies. What did this incense consist of? 11 spices. 11 spices that actually were gathered from different sources from all over the world. and there was one family in Jerusalem who were the experts at creating the spice mix that was used in the temple. To be sure, spices, this mix of known as ketoris, the spices were brought as a daily offering in the temple. And its prevalence, the prevalence of the aroma was so profound that our sages tell us that a bride who lived in Jerusalem didn't have to buy any perfume for her wedding, because she already carried such a natural fragrance from the smoke of the incense that would emanate from the temple. So while it was offered on a daily basis, on Yom Kippur it went to the next level, as this was the primary service that was done by the high priest in the Holy of Holies, after which he would offer a prayer to God for the material and spiritual welfare of the Jewish people, of mankind, and of the universe. What is the secret of the incense? What is its power? Why is it that of all things that the high priest would do on Yom Kippur, it was the burning of incense? And why was this in fact a daily feature of the temple service? We know historically that when Moses went up to Mount Sinai, encountering the angels, they taught him the secret of the incense, of the spices, and that they had the power to fend off pandemics and plagues. And this was a mechanism that was in fact employed by Moses when a plague afflicted the people. So what is the power of the incense? What does it represent? What is the smoke that rose from the temple symbolize? According to some, it was actually a buffer that between the manifest presence of God and the high priest who brought the incense. And so the presence of the smoke was indicative that God's presence was manifest, and that there needed to be some buffer between God and creation. According to Maimonides, according to the Rambam, in the book Guide to the Perplexed, the incense served as a sort of deodorizer, because in the temple there were all sorts of animal sacrifices happening at any given time, and lots of raw meat and hide, which presumably created a very negative odor, and the smell of the incense was sort of like a temple deodorizer. But the truth is that anyone who contemplates the fact that this is what the high priest did on Yom Kippur, the burning of these incense, their power to fend off plagues, suggests that there is something deeper than them serving as a deodorizer. And so let's try and unpack or unravel the mystery behind the power of the incense. And let's ask ourselves this question. Yom Kippur, holiest day of the year, Day of Atonement, the day when God forgives all of us for whatever sins we have committed throughout the year. Clearly, God is in a very happy disposition to be so forgiving. So what is it that makes God happy? Well, one way to answer that question is the story of the birth of the first Jew, whose name was given as Yitzchak, Isaac. God told Abraham and Sarah to name him Yitzchak. What does Yitzchak mean? It means laughter. Now, what kind of name is that to give a child? Would you give a child the name Joke or Laugh? So why was he given that name? Because our sages tell us when he was born, he brought a lot of joy into the world. The whole world was laughing, rejoicing with his birth. Why? Because his birth was so unexpected. Avram, Abraham, his father, was 100 years old. His mother was 90 years old, way past childbearing years. So his birth was a miracle that was celebrated by everyone, bringing much joy and laughter to the world. What is it that makes us laugh? What's the essence of a good joke? It's the unexpected punchline. What makes a comedian great is to be able to see an angle that others don't see. The surprise factor of the punchline is what makes a joke a joke. So, what makes God happy? Unexpected human experiences. So here's the thing. The incense consisted of 11 spices. Now in Torah, 10 is the number of holiness. 11 is a number that represents the unholy, the negativity of creation, negative energy, outside of the construct of holiness and sanctity. In the Torah, we find in a series of curses in the book of Deuteronomy for the commission of sin, the word arur, cursed, repeated 11 times. So 11 is associated with negative energy. None of the 11 spices in and of themselves produced a pleasant aroma. In fact, one of them, chelbano, known in English as galbanum, which was a particularly strong ingredient, produces a very pungent type of odor. And yet, somehow, the mixture of all of these 11 spices together produced this most beautiful, pleasing, unexpected aroma. What this represents is this. What makes God happiest more than anything else is when people who have experienced negativity, people who have made mistakes, people who have fallen, get up and learn from the mistake, take ownership of the mistake, deal with the mistake, and utilize it as a growth opportunity to dig more deeply and to understand the genesis of where that came from and how to be stronger and wiser moving forward. That is the greatest pleasure to God. As our sages tell us, where the penitent stands is at a much higher pedestal than the saint, than the tzaddik. While it's true that a tzaddik, a saintly individual, may be perfect in their service of God, but there is no unexpected transformation. But someone who has tasted the taste of sin, someone who has made mistakes and who has regrets, who confronts them, learns from them, grows from them, that is the transformation of the 11 negative odors of the incense into something very, very beautiful. The greatest, most powerful light is the one that is born of darkness. As we know, that the people who are most sensitive in this world are people who have had to deal with hardship, people who have had to dig deeply within themselves, who have had to overcome adversity and deal with it. On the other side of that experience, are people who are far more enlightened, sensitive, and beautiful. And that is the secret of the smoke of the incense that rose in the temple on Yom Kippur. And God is telling us that I did not program you for perfection. I programmed you to live a life of challenge. Now we can walk away from challenges, we can capitulate to them, we can be overcome by a sense of despair, hopelessness, mediocrity, or we can rise to the challenge and produce the beautiful aroma of the Ketores, in which we experience a sanctity of self, a sanctity of time, and a sanctity that we create in the world around us. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Torah View. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Storm the World. Wishing you Shabbat Shalom, and thank you for joining.